podcast. We have myself, we have Schiff as always. We're going to be covering the Sunday afternoon, the Sunday night, and the Monday night games from week one. To kick it off, we have the Broncos traveling to Seattle and losing a close game to the Seahawks 26-20. On the Broncos side of the ball, it was Bo Nix's NFL debut, and he did throw it a lot. He had 42 attempts. He completed 26 of them, but only for 138 yards. No touchdowns, two interceptions. He carried it 5 times for 35 yards and a touchdown on the ground. It gave him 13 fantasy points. Again, we're not looking at Bo Nix as a viable fantasy option, but someone we are is his number one receiver, Courtland Sutton. And he was targeted 12 times. He did play 91% of snaps. And to be fair to him, Tariq Woolen is a solid corner. It's a very solid corner. It's not the greatest matchup, but I like the 12 targets. That's the caveat I'm taking on this. We got Courtland Sutton late in our fantasy drafts. I'd like to think as the season progresses and Bo Nix hopefully improves a little bit, we can see it be a bit more productive. But on this day, Courtland only caught 4 of those 12 targets for 38 yards, giving him 7.8 fantasy points. He was out there for 91% of the snaps. He is the clear number one receiver here. So some good notes there. The other two receivers rounding out that room are Josh Reynolds, who caught 5 of his 8 targets for 45 yards, giving him 9.5 fantasy points, and Devon Vele, the 26-year-old rookie, did catch all 8 of his targets for 39 yards, and he led the receiving room with 11.9 fantasy points. He only played 49% of snaps, but it was interesting to me to see him pretty heavily out-snap Marvin Mims. That's someone that the Broncos had drafted last year, and we'll see as the season goes on, but remember they did draft Troy Franklin this year, so those last couple spots are going to be, I don't want to say ugly, but it's going to be curious how those play out. And then the tight end Greg Dulcich caught 2 of his 3 targets for 12 yards, 3.2. Again, we're only really looking at Courtland Sutton, and some, the running backs, we're curious about how those will play out. And Javonte Williams did technically lead the backfield, but only with 8 carries for 23 yards, caught 1 of his 2 targets for 0 yards. He had a bad fantasy day, 3.3 fantasy points, played 52% of the snaps. And it was weird that Jaleel McLaughlin only played 35% of the snaps, but saw 15 opportunities compared to Javonte's 10. He wasn't exactly efficient either. He only ran for 27 yards on his 10 attempts. He caught all 5 of his targets for a single yard. That is mind-blowing. And it gave him a 5.8 fantasy finish. Again,
I think he lost a fumble too.
he did. Yeah, he did lose a fumble, which gave him that 5.8 finish. Otherwise, it would have been 7.8. We'll see.
Bad.
Yeah, it was a bad week. We have interest in Jaleel just because of how they use him. We did mention in our injury report, Audric Estime is out at least 4 weeks, so it's only going to be these 2 guys. But outside of that, Will Lutz had a solid fantasy day, giving him 11, as a lot of kickers did. And the defense gave you 9 points if you happen to start him.
Yeah, one thing about Bo Nix was I think he threw the ball down the field like 10 plus yards, only 10 times, completed 2 of those passes. 2 of them were his 2 interceptions.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. It's like you did see him throw the ball a crap ton of times, but with the 138 yards, as you can imagine, a lot of it was super low ADOT. I mean, you could see with McLaughlin, he had 5 receptions that totaled 1 yard.
Yeah.
Same with Devon Vele and Josh Reynolds for that matter. I mean, between their 13 catches, they only amounted to 84 yards. So it's kind of like, I guess as compared to, like, when we looked at the Colts, and it was kind of worrisome because, Michael Pittman's target area was in that short intermediate, and it
Yeah.
seemed like everything that was hitting was down the field. This is the complete opposite. Absolutely nothing's hitting down the field, and everything is that short intermediate.
Yeah.
So as far as, like getting peppered with targets, I think I might be even a little more interested in McLaughlin now that
Yeah.
Estime went down,
Yeah.
because I mean, like we said, the Seahawks have some good cover corners, but I don't know. Just moving forward, we'll see how much Nix is able to improve throwing the ball down the field.
Yeah.
But going over to the Seahawks side of the ball, I can't really say it was much better watching that offense,
Mm-hmm.
with the exception of Ken Walker.
Yeah.
Gino did not have the greatest day. He was 18 for 25, 171 yards, a touchdown, and an interception. Also, also had probably one of the best quarterback runs for a touchdown of the week. It was really nice.
Eh,
He ran the ball 4 times for 30 yards and a touchdown. So he ended up finishing with 18.8 points. Not a bad day, but obviously I don't think there are many people starting Geno Smith in week one.
yeah.
Um, Going to the rest of the rushers in that game, Ken Walker ran the ball 20 times for 103 yards and a touchdown. He looked absolutely great in this game.
Mm-hmm.
Also got 3 targets, which he caught 2 of them for 6 yards. So he finished 18.9 points in week one. He had some abdominal pain after this game and near the end of this game, and he said he'll be all right, but it's something he's dealt with before, so something that we're monitoring moving forward. Zach Charbonnet, their running back 2, was not efficient on the ground, carried the ball 8 times for only 12 yards. However, he was, once again involved in the pass game, had 3 targets as well, caught 2 of them for 29 yards and a touchdown. So Charbonnet finished with 12.1 points. If Ken Walker was able to go, then Charbonnet is obviously a good pivot option. He
Mm-hmm.
will be the number 1 guy there, and we know he has ability to catch the ball. Going to the receivers, the forgotten man drafted so late in drafts, if drafted at all.
Yeah.
Tyler Lockett led this receiving room, had the most targets, most catches, and most yards. Had 7 targets, caught 6 of them for 77. So he finished with 13.7 points. Zach Charbonnet was the second best receiver with those 29 yards and 2 catches.
Mm-hmm.
DK Metcalf had 4 targets, but only caught 3 of them for 29 yards. Granted, he had the newly minted Pat Surtain covering him, so I'm pretty sure he was fairly motivated to play well in this game after getting that newly inked deal.
Yeah.
Um, Other than that, I mean, kind of JSN was the JSN that I was worried about and that I was kind of staying away from because, I mean, I do believe he's a talented wide receiver, but it doesn't seem his role has really expanded in this offense.
Yeah.
He had 2 targets, caught them both for 19 yards. It's that typical, not too far from the line of scrimmage. Like, we're not seeing too much out of JSN. And it's like I was saying, if you had drafted him to be your starting wide receiver 3 or flex, that I think is going to be a problem. As far as like DK, I'm not really worried about him. He was covered by one of the best, if not the best corner in
Yeah.
the league. So that's something that's kind of a one-off. But just seeing Tyler Lockett being as involved as he was shows me that JSN is not yet the number 2 wide receiver on this team. It is still DK and Tyler Lockett as the first 2 looks.
Yeah.
So after that, we had Noah Fant. He got 4 targets, caught 2 of them for 11, 3.1 points, and I mean, it wasn't too far off from the rest of the tight end performances of this week.
That's fair.
So outside of that, you had Jason Myers, kicked 2 field goals and 2 extra points, got you 10 fantasy points. That's about it with the Seahawks. I mean, looking just a little bit into their splits. Yeah, DK was out there for 88%. JSN was out there for 79%. Tyler Lockett was only out there for 54% of the snaps because we
Mm-hmm.
know he was, kind of questionable coming off injury a little bit, and we still saw him with that much involvement. That just tells me going on that it's not basically back to what I said. It's DK and Tyler Lockett, and then JSN yet again this year. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's all I really got for this one.
Yeah. Lockett's a guy that, yeah, I fear until Lockett or DK leaves the Seahawks or age really starts to show. Yeah, it's going to be those two with JSN kind of picking up the tail end of that. Uh, the game I am least excited to cover of the week is the Las Vegas Raiders going into LA and losing to the Chargers. A game that was
Yeah,
obviously very winnable. Saying that as a Raider fan, but if you watch the game, it's just a
I
disappointing.
do have a question, like kind of outside of the fantasy realm, just in general. How did you feel about the call on 4th and 1 in plus territory? There's like about 7 minutes left in the game. How did you honestly feel about that call?
It's where we punted.
Yeah, do you think that's the right call,
No,
or do you just
no,
okay?
I don't care. Even with our defense being better, and they're saying,
Hmm.
"Oh, maybe the defense can get the stop." I don't care, man. The Raider way, even if that's 4th and 4, the Raider way, I'd rather us lose going for it. I don't like putting the ball in the other team's hands, especially, albeit without many weapons. It's still Justin Herbert. It's just,
And they only needed a field goal to make it a two-score game. It was,
it's just not what
yeah.
you
I just
do.
wanted to see where you were at on that. Obviously not trying to harp on Antonio Pierce or anything, but yeah, I didn't agree with that decision either, and it was a
Yeah,
very winnable game.
yeah. It fantasy wise, it was a pretty rough week for a lot of these Raiders players. Gardner Minshew was efficient through the air. He was 25 of 33 for 257, a touchdown, a pick. Coming late in the game, he carried it 3 times for 5 yards, gave him basically 11.8 fantasy points. He had a terrible fumble lost. I don't go back and watch it if you didn't see it. It was just an unfortunate one, a very just
It
dumb
was like the same
mistake.
thing Will Levis did.
Yeah, very unforced. Just, I guess, it does happen, but
Yeah, it's just unfortunate when it happens to
yeah,
your team in a critical situation.
yeah, for sure. Zamir
'Cause that was like
White,
right before the half, and
yeah, it
yeah,
gave them points. It was
yeah.
not ideal.
Won't force you to relive that.
Yeah, Zamir White was not efficient on the ground in the first half. He finished the game 13 of 44. Towards the second half, he started getting a couple good runs, but unfortunately, on one of them, he lost a fumble at a critical time. So it was not good to see that. He caught both his targets for 2 yards. He finished with 4.6 fantasy points. Not a very good finish at all. And albeit, I mean, even with the fumble, he got out snapped by Alexander Madison, who took advantage of the opportunities he was given. He only saw 5 carries for 19 yards, but he caught 4 of his 6 targets for 43 yards and a touchdown. And on the touchdown catch, he did look pretty good. He played 60% of the snaps, 16.2 fantasy points. I don't necessarily, it doesn't make me crazy interested in Madison per se. It makes me concerned for Zamir. This isn't Josh Jacobs in the backfield where he is just getting the workhorse volume. I assumed it could potentially be that. We saw 4 good weeks from Zamir last year to end the season, but this game, he's the starter in the backfield, but has he won complete dominance of the backfield? No. And you come out and you perform like that, and it kind of brings even more question marks. So I'm curious to see how he does this week, but it's against the Ravens coming up. We'll get into that at a later episode, but it's going to be a tough matchup for him, so we'll see how it plays out. The receiving room, Devontae was targeted 6 times, caught 5 of them for 59 yards, 10.9. He's obviously going to be the lead receiver there. And the Raiders were very conservative with their play calling in the first half. They kind of had a couple in the second half where they aired it out a little bit. And I'd like to see more of that from Minshew. I think we're going to see better weeks from Devontae Adams. But with the emergence of Brock Bowers, it's not going to be Devontae Adams getting 15 targets a game. It is getting spread out a little bit. Brock Bowers saw 8 targets, the most on the team, and he caught 6 of them for 58 yards, giving him 11.8 fantasy points, which was the tight end 3 of the week. It's disgusting. Tight ends did not perform. Brock was one of them. If you waited and snagged Brock as potentially your 10th tight end, it paid off week 1. It was a solid week, and he is going to be involved going forward. We'll just see how those targets shake out, but I'd like to say him and Devontae are going to be the top 2 target getters on that team. Jacoby Myers, for how late you were getting him in drafts, I'm not mad at him getting 3 catches for 61 yards, finishing with 9.4. Him only getting targeted 3 times is a little bit of the concern. Again, I think we'll see that go up. I'd like to say he's going to fall somewhere in the 4 to 6 target range on a normal week, but we will see.
He also had a
going
rush
forward.
for 3 yards, which is where the
Yeah, I didn't even want to. He did have a rush for 3 yards. I mean, but he is the wide receiver too. We saw a lot of 3 wide receiver sets, a lot of them this game. And the third receiver is Trey Tucker. He was only targeted 3 times. He caught 2 of them for 22 yards, gave him 4.2. It just was not a good week for the Raiders. Daniel Carlson had 3 fantasy points. The defense gave us 1. It just, again, was not the prettiest weeks. Expect some better weeks for Devontae going forward, and hopefully Zamir, but I am decently concerned about Zamir going forward.
Yeah, and this was a cause for concern because, I mean, I think you've talked about he wasn't necessarily like a prolific pass catcher, but to see Madison in his first game get 6 targets out of the backfield and Zamir only get 2, that is a definite cause for concern because and it, not sitting here projecting the Raiders to be a bad team, but if they're not able to run the ball as efficiently, and given the injuries we saw on that offensive line, if they end up in a lot of negative game scripts, it's going to keep Zamir off the field
Yeah.
if he's not the guy catching passes.
Yeah, it
And
is.
that's just the thing to worry about, because if it's kind of like the Derrick Henry Justice Hill thing that we said that we were talking about. It's like if it gets to that point, I mean, there's just not going to be room to keep Zamir on the field if that's not his skill set. So we either need to see him start catching some more passes, or this is a definite worry
Yeah.
to be had. But yeah, Brock Bowers, matchup nightmare. He's going to continue to get targets and get fed. But going to the Chargers side of the ball, for a minute there, it looked like they picked up exactly where they left off last year. Their offense
Yeah.
was looking horrible. And I mean, through the air, it didn't really look that good at all. But coming into this year, they made it pretty apparent with the lack of weapons that they acquired in the passing game and the acquisition of Greg Roman and J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards, that I feel like they made it clear that their intention is to be a run-heavy team this year. And they kind of were. I mean, they threw the ball 26 times. They ran the ball 27. And Justin Herbert, 17 for 26, 144 yards and a touchdown. Ran the ball 4 times for 6 yards. He finished with 10.4 points. I mean, I don't really think anybody was considering starting Justin Herbert week 1.
Yeah.
If you have him like as a I mean, obviously a lot of people ended up drafting him as their QB2 or whatever. Someone that you might want to hold on to. We'll see what ends up happening. But as far as their running back room, we saw 10 carries out of J.K. Dobbins and 11 out of Gus Edwards, but J.K. Dobbins was the, 11 out of Gus Edwards, but J.K. Dobbins was the, 11 out of Gus Edwards, but J.K. Dobbins was the, 11 out of Gus Edwards, but J.K. Dobbins was the, 11 out of Gus Edwards, but J.K. Dobbins was the clear winner of the RB1 spot, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
135 yards on his 10 carries and a touchdown. Now, he did have two very big runs. One was for like 60 and one was for like 40, I think.
Yeah.
So, obviously, he's not going to have gigantic runs like that every game,
Yeah.
whether or not he's able, because he did get stopped at the line quite a few times. But moving forward, I still think JK is the guy with the juice. I think he will kind of be the RB1 for the Chargers moving forward, whether or not he can stay healthy the whole season remains
Mm-hmm.
to be seen. But if he is, I think it'll be a very valuable role. He was also able to haul in all three of his targets for 4 yards, but 22.9 points, fantasy finish in week one. I will take that
Yeah.
10 times out of 10. And I guess the thing, he got 3 targets, Gus only got one. So Gus has never really been a pass catching back.
Yeah.
JK does have that edge over him. Um, yeah, Gus on his 11 carries, finished 26 yards, caught his lone target for 2 yards, finished with 3.8 points. I'm not, dropping Gus Edwards because as we know, J.K. Dobbins needs to show that he can play through a whole entire NFL season.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just interesting moving forward because we know that that team wants to run the ball. Now, looking at their wide receiver room, there was a lot to be left to question going into this game.
Yeah.
I think we might have got some of it answered. Lad McConkey was the lead receiver, caught 5 of his 7 targets for 39 yards and a touchdown, finished with 14.9 fantasy points. And I mean, I'm okay with it. I
Yeah.
he where he was going in drafts, I mean, he probably is the most talented wide receiver on this roster. And if he's going to draw the most targets, I like starting him in like a wide receiver 3 flex type of position. Because, I mean, they're not going to play the Raiders every week, and the Raiders offense is not at the spot where they want to be right now. So I don't think they're going to be in a lot of positive game scripts, is what I'm trying to say. They're going to have to throw the ball a lot more. So you're going to see more of Lad McConkey. And hopefully this next guy, Quentin Johnston. I mean, he had flashes in this game where he did look not entirely like the guy that they wanted getting
Yeah.
out of the first round, but he looked like a competent NFL wide receiver. It was like, okay,
Yeah.
that we can work with this. Only caught 3 of his 5 targets for 38 yards, but I mean, Josh Palmer came out and looked like a jag.
Mm-hmm.
Um, he, which is funny because like previously he had performed very well against the Raiders, but he 4 targets, caught 2 of them for 15 yards. Also got ejected. Josh Palmer did.
And Jack. Yeah.
Uh, yeah, and Jack Jones, but
Yeah.
Raiders Chargers things are gonna happen. But yeah, I like kind of McConkey and Johnston. If those two younger, more talented receivers can be the 1 and 2, then I mean I could be interested in Johnston moving forward as a guy off the waivers just because
Yeah.
what he was drafted to be last year, and if he could at the very least be like that Mike Williams role and from the
Mm-hmm.
past on the Chargers and actually catch the ball when it's thrown to him every time or most of the time, then that will be fairly valuable. Other than that, Hayden Hurst caught 2 of his 3 targets for 33 yards, finishing with 5.3 points. Not too much else aside from Cameron Dicker getting 12 points to mention.
Yeah. It was. I mean, we're in complete agreement. I think Lad McConkey is probably going to be the guy there, and like you mentioned, the Chargers probably will not be ahead and run dominant in a bunch of games this season. So you should see a lot more opportunities going forward. But that will take us Our third game from the afternoon slate was the Cowboys beating the Browns in Cleveland 33-17. The Cowboys dominated this game. Dak realistically didn't have to do too much. And I mean, the Browns secondary is very solid. He finished 19 of 32 for 179 yards and a touchdown. Carried it once for 3 yards. He finished 11.46. Not a good finish for Dak, but again, I don't think too many games they play this season are going to go exactly like this. He's going to have to air it out more. We'll see a lot better finishes from him. The running back room is something we were interested in. And Zeke was the lead back. He played 51% of snaps. He had 10 carries for 40 yards and a touchdown. 2 catches out of the backfield for 9 yards, giving him 12.9. A very solid week for Zeke. I don't think too many people were starting him, but with the performance of Rico Dowdle in this game, I do favor Zeke. I know there were reports that were saying Dowdle is going to lead this backfield, but if Zeke stays healthy, honestly, I just don't see it.
But the thing for me, it was like, and even obviously this is deeper, but I picked him up in Dynasty just in
Yeah.
case. Like I was getting the Cowboys RB1. Didn't necessarily think it would happen, but when the guys, and there was a couple drafts where he's going really late, where it's like, okay, I'll
Yeah.
take the shot. But part of me knew, and I did mention it all here, that there's logic and there's the decision making of Jerry Jones.
Yeah.
Just because all the Cowboys beat writers are saying that Rico Dowdle looks better and is more explosive, and hell, he might even be the better player, it doesn't mean that Jerry Jones is going to be like, oh yeah, we're going to use Rico Dowdle. If Jerry says
Yeah.
we're using Zeke, they're using Zeke, and it seems to be what Jerry said. Because
Yeah. I mean, it's also Rico Dowdle's 5th year with the Cowboys, and last year was the only time he got real run. His first 3 years combined, he had 7 carries and no targets, receptions, anything. So it's one of those things where he gets to like his 5th year in the NFL, and it's like, is he really going to make that step and be the guy? Probably not. But again, it we'll see. Also, once Dalvin gets fully acclimated, if he has anything in the tank, I'm curious to see where he fits in there as well. If he has anything in the tank, we'll see. But
yeah,
the receiving room, there are things to be excited about in this receiving room. CeeDee Lamb is still the guy there. He had 10 targets. He caught 5 of them for 61 yards, 3 carries for 25 yards, 13.6 fantasy points without a touchdown. Is a solid week. He obviously is going against Denzel Ward, one of the best corners in the league. We'll see better finishes from him. And again, with how their defense played, he didn't have to do too much. There will be a lot of games where they need more from CD. The
oh
leading
yeah.
receiver, and the one who also played the most in this game, was Brandon Cooks. He caught 4 of his 7 targets for 40 yards and a touchdown. He also carried it once for 5 yards, 14.5 fantasy points. A very solid finish for him. He's someone that I think going forward, especially if Jake Ferguson does miss a little bit of time, I think you can throw him at that flex wide receiver 3. And just off his volume alone, I think he'll be viable. And that's mainly because their wide receiver 3, clear wide receiver 3, is Jalen Tolbert. He was out there for 67% of the snaps, and he only drew 2 targets. And he caught 1 of them for 12 yards, giving him 2.2. I just think there's the clear CeeDee Lamb and Brandon Cooks this season, and then that drop off to that third receiver. It isn't going to be Jalen Tolbert fighting with Brandon Cooks for the second most targets. I just don't think that's going to be the case. Jake Ferguson, on the other hand, didn't have a good week. He did see 5 targets. He only caught 3 of them for 15 yards, giving him 4.5 points. He played 62% of the snaps before injuring his knee. He has an MCL sprain. He's probably going to miss a couple weeks. I mean, we'll see how it plays out, but with him missing, I don't look to any other Cowboys tight end to potentially pick up. But if you're, again, I just see more volume for Brandon Cooks and CeeDee Lamb. I think it's going to be hyper volume for them going forward. And as always, the best fantasy kicker of last season, Brandon Aubrey, did start off hot again, gave you 21 if you started him. And the number one defense from last season, the Cowboys, they gave you 18.
Did you see at the end of the first half where they were gonna kick the 66-yarder? I think
They
for
got a
some
false
reason
start.
they no, it was a delayed
Delayed
game.
game.
Yeah, because he made it,
Yeah.
but it was a delayed game. And then they set up for the 71-yarder and they didn't let him try it. I was so mad. I was like, come on, man. Let him.
He potentially
That would
makes
have
that. He
been. Yeah,
potentially
I
does.
was like, let him at least try. Who the hell cares?
Yeah, I
But
did
yeah,
see that.
I was looking forward to seeing him try the 71-yarder. It didn't
That would have been just incredible.
happen. A 7-point field goal, dog.
If he would have finished with 28, oh my goodness. I mean,
Ooh.
it could have happened.
The amount of kickers we saw outscore first round picks this week was uncanny.
Yeah, he outscored everyone on the team. You know, he was the number one
Yeah.
scorer.
And that team and the next team that we need to talk about, the Cleveland Browns. Deshaun Watson did not look good. Granted, came out and played against the Cowboys defense, but it's like he just doesn't look any better than
No.
last year coming off the injury and suspension. It's just the same thing. And I'm not enthused. Obviously, as far as Amari Cooper, he's going to have better days than he did this past week. But I don't know. Deshaun just doesn't look good at all. He was
No.
24 for 45 for 169 yards and one touchdown, two
Yeah.
interceptions. He also ran the ball 5 times for 39 yards and I believe lost a fumble, finishing with 12.7 points. Um, yeah, I'm not impressed with the play of Deshaun Watson. His story has been the same for a couple years now.
Yeah.
Jerome Ford finished with 44 yards on 12 rushing attempts. Also got a touchdown at the ass end of this game, which saved a lot of people. Realistically, it saved my day in Dynasty. I
Yeah.
won by like 5 points. And he also did the thing that we love about Jerome Ford, caught 6 of his 7 targets for 25 yards. So he had an 18.9 point finish in PPR setting. Other than that, Pierre Strong had 2 rush attempts for 10 yards. So until our man Nick Chubb gets back, it's
Yeah.
Jerome Ford. I mean, Pierre Strong was also involved in the passing game, caught 2 of his 3 targets for 20 yards, but I mean, I'm not worried about it, especially when they literally don't have anyone else out there. It's
Yeah.
just him and Strong. So for the receiving room, Amari Cooper did get 9 targets, but he only caught 2 of them for 16 yards. Granted, he had one pretty bad drop, but I think the rest was just the quarterback play of Deshaun Watson is so horrible. Um, his only touchdown went to the new acquisition, Jerry Jeudy, who got 8 targets, caught 3 of them for 25 yards and that touchdown. So Jerry finished with 11.5 points. Amari only finished with 3.6. So I don't think too many people were starting Jerry Jeudy, and I don't know how comfortable I am moving forward
Yeah.
with anybody, but it's kind of like the I don't know, Elijah Moore thing of last year. It's like how valuable is this Browns wide receiver two with Deshaun Watson playing the way he is.
Yeah.
It might have a little more value though this week and maybe a few more moving forward with David Njoku being out. Njoku got 5 targets, caught 4 of them for 44 yards. He had 8.4 points. He was kind of lighting it up before he got hurt. Jordan Akins came in and took over for him, caught 3 of his 4 targets for 27 yards. I don't know how interested I am in Akins. Probably just hoping that Omari sees
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah.
But yeah, outside of that, Dustin Hopkins, 7 points. Deshaun just looks so horrible. I don't know.
Yeah. That'll take us to our next game, the Commanders at the Buccaneers. This one had a bit more excitement to it. The Commanders did lose it 20-37. Jaden Daniels looked good fantasy-wise. He did not look the greatest to feed your receivers and his targets. He was 17 of 24 for 184 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions. He did carry it 16 times for 88 yards and 2 touchdowns on the ground. It gave him 28.16, finishing as the QB3 on the week. But immediately after it, Dan Quinn said, quote unquote, "We'd love to see him remain a passer first, and I think it's going to come with more experience, honestly." Certainly, he said 18, but it was actually 16 carries. 16 carries is not the model that we're looking for, certainly with Brian Robinson, Austin Eckler, and others here. And I don't blame him. Obviously, how it came out can always be construed the wrong way. He's trying to protect his young quarterback, saying, "We don't want you running the ball 16 times. It's how you're going to get hurt out there." And that's viable to say. But fantasy-wise, that's going to get you paid if you did have Jaden Daniels. Again, I don't think
He
many
also
people...
fumbled the ball 3 times. So, yes, they do not want him running it 16 times.
Yeah, I mean, it's scary when you're, again, we'll see going forward, but we talked about, and Jahan Dotson, I don't even think he's played out the way they would hope, but when they traded him away, we're like, oh, it's scary Terry season. He's the guy. He's the only one there. He's going to be getting hyper volume. 4 targets for Scary Terry on the day. He caught 2 of them for 17 yards, 3.7. That's a bit concerning. That is not what we want to see. Luke McCaffrey is potentially the wide receiver 2 here. He played 60.
I mean, bro, it's like when you look at it, the longest receptions were to Austin Eckler, 22 yards, and Brian Robinson, 32 yards. It just it's like the same thing that we were talking about with Anthony Richardson. It's like they run the ball a lot.
And then they dump it to the running back potentially.
Or actually, it's like this. I meant the same thing like with Bo Nix. It's like the downfield accuracy is just not there yet. And that's going to hurt Terry. But it's really going to help the running backs.
Yeah. I mean, some people have looked at Luke McCaffrey late round. He did catch 3 of his targets, all 3 of them for 18 yards, giving him 4.8. De'Ami Brown's out there getting cardio, played 56% of snaps, was not even targeted. I mean, it's what it's definitely concerning. We'll see going forward if there's changes made after what Dan Quinn did say. But the running backs did benefit from that. Brian Robinson didn't have an efficient day on the ground. He was 12 carries for 40 yards, but he did get in the end zone. And he caught 3 of his 4 targets for 49 yards. It gave him 17.9, 56% of snaps. He's looking solid out there. I like his usage. I like his ability out of the backfield. We'll see going forward, but that is a solid week from him. And their newly acquired running back, Austin Eckler. How much does he have left in the legs? Probably not too much on the ground. He only carried it twice for 10 yards. But he did catch all 4 of his targets for 52 yards, giving him 10.2. He played 53% of snaps. Again, if you grabbed Eckler, the thing is some people were grabbing Eckler before Brian Robinson, and I didn't like that. I figured Brian Robinson would be the lead guy there, and at least off opportunities, Brian Robinson had 16 and Austin Eckler had 6.
Okay, there's one thing. We always talk about how Like, you don't want a piece of a committee running back on a bad team. This does not include teams where, dog, 12 of the 24 passing attempts went to either the running back or Zach Ertz.
Yeah. It's tough. I mean, you'd hope all the other 12 went
Everything
to
is just
Scary Terry, but they didn't.
dink and dunk.
But they
Everything is
didn't.
dink and dunk.
Yeah. And I mean,
Uh,
speaking of Zach Ertz, I know we talked a lot about Ben Sinnott. Zach Ertz is the guy there. He played 71% of the snaps. He was targeted 4 times. He caught 3 of them for 28 yards, giving him 5.8. Ben Sinnott only saw 22% of snaps, was not targeted. I will say, and I'm not saying it's going to end like this, but we did see this literally with Trey McBride last year. Zach Ertz is talented. He's still very talented, even as he's getting up there in age. Can Zach Ertz stay healthy through a season? We have not seen it as of recent, and we'll see how the season plays out. I think as it goes on, Ben Sinnott's a guy you can potentially, I mean, you could probably drop him and pick him back up later. If you even drafted him, it was like the last pick of the draft. So it's not like you're losing anything there. He was a flyer we liked to potentially see how he'd be involved. At least early on in this season, it does not seem like he is going to be involved. And outside of that, I had to mention the kicker. He made both his extra points, but missed both his field goals. And the defense finished
hold
with
on. The funniest thing about that, Cade York, the Browns were gonna get a conditional pick if they kept him like through a certain amount of week, but he didn't even make it to week 2, so they
yeah.
don't get the conditional pick.
I don't blame him. Yeah, he missed both his field goals. That was his contribution to the Commanders, and their defense finished with -3 fantasy points.
Yeah, like there's certain teams like Carolina and seemingly the Giants that we want to target for our defenses. Washington is going to be one that we want to target for
The
our
offense.
offensive players.
Yeah.
Baker Mayfield in this game was 24 for 30, 289 yards, and 4 tutties.
Mm-hmm.
Dude went off. Also ran the ball 3 times for 21 yards. Just had to add that.
Yeah.
29.7 points. Beautiful start. Um, as far as the running back room, you look at it and you see at the top Bucky Irving, 9 attempts for 62 yards. And then you see Rashad White, 15 attempts for 31 yards. The
Mm-hmm.
poster boy for inefficiency, but using his talent in the receiving game to be fantasy relevant. Rashad White also caught all 6 of his
Yeah.
targets for 75 yards. So he finished with 16.6 points on the day. Um, it's exactly what we said coming into the year about Rashad White and what he was going to be. I mean,
Yeah.
there's no surprise at all. Well, I don't really have too much to say just because that's what I thought he was going to do, be super inefficient on the ground and make up for it in the pass game.
Yeah.
So moving, and I mean, we've talked about Bucky Irving and how we feel about him. Um, obviously, had a very efficient day on the ground, but I think his, and also he caught 2 of his 3 targets for 14 yards. So he finished with 9.6 points. But his real value will be if Rashad White were to miss, then I think if you are a Rashad White owner, that Bucky Irving is a very important piece to have
Yeah.
because that was his first NFL game and he was already running the ball very efficiently. Granted, it was against Washington. So
Mm-hmm.
some of these things is how much was it they were playing against the worst defense in the NFL, how much of it was this is a week to week thing that we are going to see.
Yeah.
Regardless, in his first NFL minutes, dude went 9 for 62, gets you 9.6 points. Probably available in most of leagues.
Yeah.
So, interesting guy to look at.
Mm-hmm.
One thing we did love to see coming into this game was Chris Godwin going back into the slot for 55% of his snaps.
Yeah.
He had 8 targets that he caught 8 of for 83 yards and a touchdown. So, love to see that. Chris Godwin, 22.3 fantasy points. But he was not the lead fantasy receiver on this team because Mike Evans
The guy.
had one of the nicest touchdowns. That catch was beautiful. I mean,
He's,
went like waited, showed the late hand like around St. Juice. Oh my God. For textbook, just beautiful catch. Mike
yeah.
Evans, first ballot, Hall of Fame, book it.
Yeah.
Anyways, my man's got 6 targets, caught 5 of them for 61 yards and 2 tutties, 23.1 fantasy points. Then the other guy that I mentioned was out there for 84% of snaps,
Yeah.
starting in his first game in the NFL. Jalen McMillan had 3 targets, caught one of them, but it was for a 32-yard touchdown.
Yep.
So I think the Bucks are going to be a good offense. I
Yeah.
think that they went out and paid Baker for a reason, that he's good there. And yeah, it was against the Commanders. We'll see how they do going forward. But I mean, I picked up McMillan in our home league just because
It's a
I
good
like the
stash.
upside of a rookie. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, that's about it here. We had McLaughlin, their kicker, get you 15 points. And yeah, let's get on into that
Sunday
good
night
old
football.
Sunday night game.
Yeah. The Rams at the Lions. The Rams came up just a little bit short in this one, 20-26. And the guys that we were starting this week did perform. Matt Stafford was 34-49 for 317 yards, a touchdown and interception, 15.7 fantasy points just about. Kyron Williams, we were wondering how it would look with Blake Corum. And after the reports came out, I remember saying, one, I wouldn't be surprised if Blake Corum was super involved, or two, I wouldn't be surprised if he was not involved at all. There's going to be no in between. And it looks like it's going to be the latter, because the only other running back to get a touch was Ronnie Rivers. It's not Blake Corum in this game. Now, we'll see how it goes going forward, but when Kyron is playing 91% of the snaps, that
I think Sean McVay himself said they didn't want to do that. I don't know that
yeah.
I think that might be the most we see him play this whole year, because when you look at it, it's like starting off, I mean, it's literally right where they picked off last year. This is the team that they played in the playoffs, so it's already like playoff environment.
Mm-hmm.
Matt Stafford going back to Detroit. You got this whole thing like they're gonna put the guy that they trust, and it was a close game. So it was like they couldn't really take him off the field for Blake Corum. Um, how many games are going to be close where they can't take Kyron off the field for Blake Corum? That I don't know, but I do
Yeah.
know that they want to rotate it a lot more than that.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's, I mean, and we'll touch on it in just a second, but yeah, Kyron not efficient on the ground. 18 carries for 50 yards. He'd get in the end zone, caught all 3 of his targets for 4 yards, giving him 14.4, a solid fantasy week for him. Puka Nakua only played 32% of the snaps. We were seeing the volume. It was there. He caught all 4 of his targets for 35 yards. He ran it once. And then he goes down. He finishes with 8.2. He only played 32% of the snaps, an injury to his knee. He is on the IR, and I've already heard to not be surprised if it lasts longer than 4 weeks. Now,
Yeah.
that's a big hit for Puka owners, and that is the best news for Cooper Kupp owners. Cooper Kupp was out there for every single snap, and we saw a vintage Cooper Kupp game. 21 targets to Cooper Kupp, caught 14 of them for 110 yards and a touchdown, carried it twice for 10 yards, 32 fantasy points. Expect more weeks like that. Now, the only scary thing is the past 2 years we've seen Cooper Kupp miss extended time. And
And he
now,
got tackled 16 times in the first game.
now you're seeing him get hyper targeted. You're seeing again, if Cooper Kupp
A
stays
lot,
healthy,
bro.
he is going to be the number one, potentially literally the number one fantasy wide receiver. But I just want to see. It's just not realistic for him to get targeted 20 times a game and last through this whole season. So I'm curious to see how it plays. But very excited for Cooper Kupp fantasy owners. That is very exciting to see. So,
100%. And like I said, the only thing that I think, and we're both worried about the same thing, is like, dude's 31 years old and got hit at least 16 times
yeah.
full speed in game one.
Yeah.
In game one. And like, bro, I'm not saying that he's not durable, but it's like over the span of 17 games,
That's tough.
like there's just no way, like if they want to be as successful as they want to be, you ain't throwing him like you're going to have to involve Demarcus Robinson and Tyler Scott a lot more. There's just no way like you're getting that man tackled 16 times a game.
Yeah.
That's crazy. That's running back numbers, man. Like
Yeah. No, it's yeah. I mean, yeah, it's incredible
it's just
to
when you think about it like that, it's crazy.
It is. It is insane. And again, with Puka going down, we did see the emergence or more involvement of Demarcus Robinson. He was targeted 7 times, caught 4 for 42, 8.2 fantasy points. He played 92% of snaps. He was already going to be their starting third receiver, so now he's going to bump into that 2 slot. And now Tyler Johnson gets his run. He played 65% of snaps, was targeted 7 times as well, caught 5 of them for 79 yards, 12.9. The Rams air it out. If who is going to be more involved, it should be Demarcus Robinson. But I mean, if you want to roll the dice on Tyler Johnson and for whatever reason your receivers are banged up or you had a Christian Watson, here's a here's just a disgusting question. Christian Watson with Malik Willis or Tyler Johnson with Matt Stafford this coming week?
Tyler Johnson.
It's just if you
Bro, I
find
don't trust Malik. Like, look, I would much rather be the only one I'm trusting, like I said, on the Packers
Shaden Reed.
wide receiver is Jaden Reed, just because I know he's gonna get those the end arounds, the stupid like. I hope to God Malik Willis could throw a screen pass, but I really don't know.
Yeah,
Um, I just don't trust him. I don't at all. So
yeah,
give me literally anybody else that has a chance to touch the ball.
yeah. And then with Tyler Higbee being sidelined to start the year, Colby Parkinson got all of the volume just about. He played 88% of the snaps, caught 4 of his 5 targets for 47 yards, finishing with 8.7. If you did happen to have a David Njoku, a Jake Ferguson, you missed out on Isaiah Likely. You look at a Taysom Hill or a Colby Parkinson. I just think Colby Parkinson should not be a tight end that is going to dud you. He should get, 3 to 5, potentially 6 targets, catch a couple of them, give you a week that you can survive on until you get your guys back. And I mean, that's really it. Josh Carty finished with 9 fantasy points. The defense gave us 4. The Rams do have an exciting fantasy offense, though. That is one thing I will say. They have the guys that you know are going to perform on the Rams, and typically they do.
Yeah, just very disappointed about Puka.
Yeah.
Had him in Dynasty, but thankfully before I'd picked up Demarcus Robinson, so I didn't have to really worry about that. Now I'm just deciding on whether or not I want to drop Jahan Dotson for Tyler Scott. But that's neither here or there. The next thing we have to talk about is the Detroit Lions in their fantasy performance. Jared Goff, we were a bit disappointed with 18 for 28, 217 yards, a touchdown, and an interception. It was a bit weird. It was like both teams were just like, I'm going to run the ball. No, I'm going to run the ball more. And it got to a point where, yes, he ended up throwing the ball 28 times, but still, there was a lot of disappointment to be had in this game in the way of receiving.
Yeah.
David Montgomery going into the running back room. David Montgomery led the way with 17 attempts for 91 yards. Kind of took over on that overtime possession. They
Oh yeah.
really just ran the ball down the Rams' throats and into the end zone and into the game.
That made
That
his
was as
fantasy
simple as it was.
finish
Oh yeah,
viable. It would have been a little rough
definitely.
without that.
Yeah, but they just said we're gonna put the ball in Monty's hands, and that's how we're gonna end this game, and that's exactly what they did.
Yeah.
He finished with one target, caught it for 2 yards. So Monty had 16.3 points. Jameer Gibbs had 11 attempts for 40 yards, not the most efficient on the ground, but also had that touchdown and caught four of his six targets for 34 yards. So he finished with 17.4 points. Another great day out of the Lions running back room. Jared Goff ran the ball one time for 7 yards. Good job, Jared. Going into the wide receiver room, we saw Jameson Williams
I couldn't believe it, to be honest. I
lead the room
could not believe it.
with 9 targets, caught 5 of them for 121 yards and a touchdown. So he finished with 24.4 fantasy points. The next closest was Sam Laporta with 4 receptions on 5 targets for 45 yards, and he got 8.5 points. We skipped past the Jameer Gibbs stat line that we talked about to finally get to Amon-Ra St. Brown, who Derek and I are both in the same boat because that's my dynasty wide receiver one. Um, 3 catches on 6 targets for 13 yards. I do 100% believe that this was just
It's an
an
anomaly.
anomaly.
Yeah.
We are not going to see him get out targeted by Jameson Williams at least many more times if we see it again.
Yeah.
I just don't. I don't know. He's too talented, and we've seen this offense run through him for so long that I just don't believe that this is going to be a thing moving forward. Now, while one thing about Jameson Williams is he's coming off the ACL tear his rookie season. Sophomore season, he's suspended for half of it pretty much. So he comes through, and the Lions are already really good by the
Solid.
time he's back. So there's no real reason to kind of like, oh, let's wedge him in there. Like things are already working with Josh Reynolds and Amon-Ra St. Brown and Sam Laporta. So there was no real need to insert him in. But then at the beginning of this, they don't have Josh Reynolds anymore, who was kind of their de facto wide receiver 2 last year. They insert Williams into there, and then obviously he's a bit more talented than Reynolds was. It could definitely eat into Amon Ra's target share. It's not probably going to be as crazy and hyper focused around him and Laporta as it was last year, but I still think the Lions are going to be a very good offense, and it's something
Yeah.
that I want a piece of.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not worried about Amon Ra. While it might not be as like, I think the floor just might not be as extremely high as it was last year. Like you're not looking at like a 16, 15 point floor every single game. But I still think he is going to be the top 5 wide receiver come the end of the year.
Yeah.
So I'm not really worried about it. It was a bad game, but it is what it is.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, that's really all for this one.
Yeah.
Oh, James Williams also had a rush for 13 yards. So
Yeah. It coming into the season, something people need to like realize is when Jameer Gibbs shot up so high on the draft boards, I was hesitant to grab him because David Montgomery has only played 5 years in the NFL. It's not like he is Zeke wear on his legs, a Dalvin Cook wear on his legs. They're thinking, they drafted Jameer Gibbs. He's going to take this leap forward. David Montgomery still has plenty of juice. He's still going to be heavily involved in that. As long as he is healthy, he is going to play around 50% of those snaps. And Lions are being smart. Why overuse Jameer Gibbs this early on if you don't have to? Keep him healthy. Don't use him too much. I really like Jameer Gibbs and David Montgomery. They're both week in and week out starters. But it's a reason I was a bit hesitant to use, if you play a 12 man, he's dang near right at that swap at the 12. If you're playing a 10 man, it's like, let me take him beginning of the second round. It's a little difficult when you can wait rounds later and get workhorse guys like a Kamara, Rashad White that you know are going to get just insane volume and potentially end around the same. So I think Jameer is going to finish better than he did last season, but I don't know how much better. As long as David Montgomery's there.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I just like that he's going to get targets and Montgomery is not. That's the one thing that keeps it like I'm cool with Gibbs, but yeah, I just like the Lions offense.
For sure.
And there's not too many mouths to feed, just enough.
Yeah, no, that's 100% true. And finally, our Monday night game. The Jets at the 49ers. The Niners won it 32-19. It was really closer to 32-12, but or 32-11. It's just the Jets got that garbage time touchdown. The Niners defense dominated. Aaron Rodgers didn't look terrible, but he did look a bit older, coming back his first game after missing an entire year against the 49ers in Santa Clara, not San Francisco, is not an ideal place to be. And it showed a little bit. He finished the game 13 of 21, 167 yards, a touchdown, a pick, 9.6 fantasy points. He didn't play the whole game. Tyrod came in at the very end. You know, I expected there to be some rust. They played a really good team. There will be better weeks from Aaron Rodgers, but a lot of people were not. I mean, really no one should have been starting him week 1 in fantasy, so we'll see going forward. But yeah, Tyrod played that garbage drive at the end. He finished with 36 yards. He threw that touchdown to Allen Lazard. I'm not going to talk about him more. Breece Hall is the guy there. He played basically the entire game. He had 16 carries for 54 yards and a touchdown, caught 5 of 6 targets for 39 yards, 18.3. A very good week from Breece Hall. And again, they played the Niners. You're going to see a lot better weeks from Breece than you saw this week. At the end, we saw Braylon Allen get some garbage time snaps. He played 18%, a carry for 8 yards, caught his target for 9. He was the youngest, I think, in the Super Bowl era to get a touch in the NFL. He is 20 years old.
Holy shit.
Yeah, Braylon Allen reclassified coming into college, so he went to college a year early. And if I remember right, I will confirm very quickly. Yes, he is 20 years old. So he is very, very young to be playing in the NFL against grown men.
Oh, God. Just a funny little... So, the Niners' backup quarterback apparently is Brandon Allen. Mm-hmm. He had one rushing attempt for -1 yard. I just wasn't paying attention to what team I was
Probably
on.
the kneel at the end.
I clicked on Brandon Allen, and I was like, what the hell? That's not Braylon Allen. It's like, wait. Oh, I was like, oh,
making
Brandon.
him come in and do the kneel is like when the backup comes in at like the end of a basketball game, they're just running the clock and they make him get the turnover when the buzzer hits 0. Like, you're gonna make him get the negative yard, but yeah, no, that's
cold-hearted.
That is funny. Garrett Wilson had a solid game. He was targeted 11 times, caught 6 for 60 yards for 12 fantasy points. He had 4 catches for 40 yards on the very first drive. So he was blanketed pretty heavy after that. But it's the Niners. They're going to make you beat them not with your best option. I like the volume from Garrett Wilson. I like the connection we saw. And one thing we saw, there were a couple passes to Garrett Wilson that I was watching the game and literally said out loud, so that's the best pass Garrett Wilson has ever been thrown in his career. And it probably wasn't wrong. That's the sad part. He finally has a quarterback, a real quarterback, to get him the ball. And we're going to see much better weeks from Garrett Wilson. So not a great week, but not a bad week either. 11 targets, we take that. The number 2 receiver, Allen Lazard. He had the connection. He's basically played with Rodgers his whole career. We should have known this, to be honest. But they brought in Mike Williams. We expected
something.
We expected something.
Life.
And it was Alan Lazard. He was targeted 9 times, caught 6 of them for 89 yards, 2 touchdowns. He did get the one in garbage time, but even with that, I'm pretty sure we did the math without that drive.
We
And
did,
what?
yeah.
He still had like
He,
13 or 14 fantasy points without that
I
garbage
think it
drive.
was 16.
16. He had a great week. And Rodgers is going to look to him. He's going to be the number 2 target in that wide receiver room. Mike Williams, yeah, played 18% of snaps, was not targeted. He did tear his ACL. He's coming off that injury, but it was week 3 of last season. He's almost had an entire calendar year. And a lot of guys recover a lot quicker from that. I mean, Aaron Rodgers tore his Achilles, and he's out there playing. So it wasn't the greatest sign. We saw Xavier Gibson actually
Yeah.
be the wide receiver 3 there. Now, will Mike Williams get more acclimated as weeks go on? I would assume a little bit. But if you went out and grabbed Alan Lazard on the waiver, I think that's a great pickup going forward. It very well could be good. Because we saw Tyler Conklin play 90% of snaps and only get targeted twice. He caught one of them for 6 yards. And, I mean, Greg Zerloin had 1 point, and the defense had 2. I'll bring it up. We have our friend in our league that had Christian McCaffrey, and it was week 1. I was trying to be courteous. I texted him. I said, yo, you going to pick up Jordan Mason? McCaffrey's not playing. He was down 11 points coming into this game with Brandon Ayuk, Greg Zerloin, and the Jets defense. He said, I don't really need him. I said, okay. I said, you sure? He didn't reply. 5 minutes go by. I said, someone else is going to take this guy. I got to grab him while I can. I take Jordan Mason. He ends up losing because Ayuk, Zerloin, and the Jets defense couldn't get him 11. If you want to talk about bad beats, that's just terrible. But that just shows. Why would you not take Jordan Mason if you have That's a whole different conversation to be had, but worth noting.
Proactive, not reactive.
Yeah, always take the chance, especially guys like McCaffrey that you know do have an injury history, injuries that could potentially linger. You always grab the backup in case.
Yep. Speaking of, we'll get to that guy right now. On the Niners side of the ball, Brock Purdy was 19 for 29, 231 yards, and he ran the ball once for 11 yards. Finished with 10.3 points, thank God, because I was able to win my dynasty game because of that.
Yeah.
Also, Jordan Mason. Have a day, my guy. Went 147 yards on 28 attempts, also had a touchdown, and he caught his lone target for 5 yards. So 22.2 points for Jordan Mason. Great day. In the receiving room, you saw Jawan Jennings lead the way, caught all 5 of his targets for 64 yards. He's just a guy that's going to be involved. I mean, if you watched the Super Bowl last year, if the Niners won that game, he very well should have won Super Bowl MVP. He threw a touchdown pass, caught a touchdown. I mean, the guy was all over the place and incredible. I don't know why it's like, realistically, he's someone that probably should be rostered.
Yeah.
In all honesty, I mean, just knowing that he is going to have this involvement every game, whether or not it's 5 targets, 5 catches for 64 yards, he's going to be involved. And if Debo or Ayuk goes down, we have seen him step in and be that de facto wide receiver too and play the role very well. So, yeah, I like Juwan Jennings, and Debo Samuel had a pretty good game, I'd say. Caught 5 of his 9 targets for 54 yards, but also ran the ball 8 times for 23 yards and a touchdown, giving him 18.7 points on the day. And I mean, Kittle caught 4 of his 5 for 48 points, which for tight ends this week, that was actually a very good score. So, but Ayuk, I mean, I think it kind of showed.
Yeah, hadn't been there much.
There's one that I swear last year, the one that hit him, like that diving catch that
in the
he
end
went to
zone.
make. Yeah, I feel like he catches that last year.
Yeah.
But you miss all of camp. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
He finishes with 2 catches on 5 targets for 28 yards, only 4.8 points. And the only other thing to talk about, but the guy went also nuclear, as a lot of kickers seem to in the first week. Jake Moody hit all 6 of his field goal attempts
Gosh.
and 2 extra points for 26 fantasy points.
Yeah.
So yeah.
What a week. Week 1 is
Yeah.
done. We are done with week 1. We are back. And I already hate it. And I love it at the same time. I already hate
Yeah.
it. It's fantasy
Yeah.
football.
Something that just came out, Devon Achane is active today. So we will see how much he plays. And yeah, I'm looking forward to this Thursday night game, starting off week 2 of the NFL season. Glad to be back, boys. Derek, you got anything to add for the end of this one?
We are good to go.
All right, well, you guys already know. Come back next time. Take more reps with the first team.
Yes, sir.